Come stand out here with me for a minute. It's the last week of July. The plants are up over my head. Dark green, the best-looking vines I've had in years. And down on the straw, under the third cluster, there's a little pile of dried yellow stems. 12 of them. Every one of those flowers opened, and every one of them let go without setting a thing. If that's what your tomato patch looks like this morning, I want you to hear the first thing straight, because it changes how you fix it. Those flowers did not die today. They were finished off about 2 weeks ago, before they even opened, while you were out there watering them faithfully and wondering what you'd done wrong. Nothing you did last night caused this, and nothing you do tonight will bring those particular flowers back. We're going to walk through this the way I'd walk through it if you called me over the fence. 7 things shut a tomato down in July, and I'm going to give them to you in the order I actually check them, most likely first. Number 3 is the one almost nobody looks at, and it's sitting 6 feet from your tomato bed right now. Number 5 is the one where your plant is punishing you for being generous. And near the end, I'm going to give you 3 so-called fixes that get passed around every summer, all 3 of which will either do nothing or make your situation worse. Stay with me for that part, because I've watched good gardeners strip a plant bare in August trying to help it. If you like the old way of doing things explained with the real reason underneath, hit subscribe and stick around. Today, we're figuring out exactly why your tomatoes quit, and then what to do with the rest of your season, because there's a whole second half coming that most people give up on right about now. Here's the thing my grandfather used to say when I'd come to him in August, 17 years old and furious at a tomato plant. He'd say, "Tomatoes take July off." He was not being poetic. He was describing something the old market growers all knew and planned their entire year around, and it took modern horticulture until the second half of the last century to explain the machinery underneath it. So, let's start with the machinery. A tomato flower is a strange little contraption. It's got the male parts and the female parts inside the same blossom, so it doesn't need a bee, doesn't need a neighbor plant, doesn't need anything but a good shake. The yellow anthers form a cone around the center. The pollen falls down inside that cone onto the sticky stigma, and a pollen tube grows down the style to the ovary. That whole job has a deadline. The extension folks at Minnesota put the window at about 50 hours. 50 hours from the time the flower opens. If fertilization doesn't happen inside that window, the flower yellows at the little stem behind it, the pedicel, and it drops. You can actually see it coming a day ahead if you know to look. The pedicel goes pale yellow before anything else does. Now, heat. 2 numbers matter, and one of them gets almost all the attention it doesn't deserve. Daytime over about 90 degrees hurts? Yes. But nighttime is the one that decides your harvest. Ideal fruit set happens in a night window between about 60 and 70 degrees. Let your night lows sit above 75, and pollen tube growth stalls out. The pollen either goes sterile or it goes tacky, gummy, and won't shake loose off the anther at all. Maryland's extension put it plainly during one mid-Atlantic heat wave a couple summers back. Days over 90 with lows only dropping to 70 will cause blossom drop and fruit abortion, and there will be repercussions for weeks after. Not days, weeks. Which brings me to the second thing, and this is the one that keeps people chasing their tails all summer. The damage runs on a delay. Penn State's people put a number on it that I wish every seed packet carried. High temperatures 7 to 15 days before a flower opens will abort that flower. 7 to 15 days before. The bud is being built inside the plant while you're sitting in the air conditioning watching the forecast, and if it's cooking during that build, the flower that eventually opens is already a dud. It just doesn't know it yet. Think about what that means for how you troubleshoot. You had a hot stretch the second week of July. You didn't see much wrong at the time because the flowers open then were built back in early July when things were mild. Then the weather breaks, it's beautiful, 78 and breezy, and that's exactly when your plant starts dumping flowers. So you conclude that whatever you changed last week broke it. You changed your watering. You added something. You moved a cage. None of it was you. You're reading a receipt for weather that's already gone. I've had people tell me they gave up and pulled healthy plants in the third week of July because of flowers that were killed off before Independence Day. Third, go stand at your tomato bed tonight after dark and put your hand flat on whatever's around it. The concrete patio, the driveway, the south wall of the garage, the black plastic mulch. That stuff soaked up sun all day, and it's giving it back all night, right at your plants, and it's the reason two gardens on the same street can have night temperatures 8 degrees apart. Daytime shade does nothing about this. That's why people put up shade cloth, feel good about themselves, and still get nothing. The old-timers had this figured out by accident and habit. The tomato patch went out in the open, out in the middle where the air moved, not tucked up against the warm side of the house where we all put it now because it looks tidy. And they mulched with straw, spoiled hay, leaves, whatever the barn had. Straw sits light and pale over the soil, holds a lot of air, reflects a good bit of light back, and keeps the root zone cooler. Black plastic does the opposite. It's terrific in May in Vermont when you're begging the soil to warm up. In late July in Georgia, it's a heat battery strapped to your root system. Same tool, opposite job, and the calendar decides which. Containers are the extreme version of this. A dark pot in full sun can swing 30 degrees between dawn and mid-afternoon, and it cooks the root ball from every side at once because there's no deep soil underneath to buffer it. If your in-ground plants are setting and your patio pots aren't, you've found your answer and you didn't need me. Drop your USDA zone and last night's low in the comments. I'm curious how many of you are sitting above that 75-degree line right now. My money's on more than half. Fourth thing, and this one splits the country in two. Humidity. Tomatoes set best between about 40 and 70% relative humidity, and you can miss that window from either side. Over 80%, which is most of the southeast from June to September, the pollen clumps up into a paste and simply will not fall out of the cone no matter how the wind blows. Under 40%, which is most of the high desert and the interior west, the stigma dries out before the pollen tube can get going, and you get the same empty cluster from the opposite cause. Same symptom, two different problems, two different answers, and this is where bad advice does real harm. Out in Nevada, Extension has been telling people for decades to run a light overhead sprinkle in the heat of the day. It cools the canopy, It raises the humidity around the flowers, and the water jarring the plant knocks the pollen loose. Three good things at once. Now take that exact advice to Alabama, and you've just wet the foliage in 85% humidity, which is how you invite early blight and septoria into a plant that's already stressed. In humid country, you go the other direction. Open the plant up a little, give it airflow, wider spacing, get the interior moving. Dry country adds moisture, humid country adds air. Know which one you live in. Let me back up and take stock, because we've covered ground. Flowers drop when pollen fails. Pollen fails from night heat above 75, from heat that hit a week or two before the flower even opened, from stored heat radiating off the hardscape around your bed after dark, and from humidity that's either too thick to let pollen fall or too thin to let it germinate. Everything so far is weather and sight. The next two are things we do to ourselves. Fifth, look at your plant honestly. Is it 4 feet of gorgeous, dark, deep green foliage? Thick stems, huge leaves, the kind of plant you'd photograph. That plant may be telling you it's had too much nitrogen. Push a tomato hard with nitrogen, and it does exactly what you asked, which is grow leaf and stem, and it puts flowering and fruit set on the back burner. Excessive nitrogen encourages lush vegetative growth and works against fruit set. That's not folk wisdom. That's on extension sheets going back 50 years, and it's the single most common self-inflicted wound I see in a home garden. The old rule was simple, and it was right. You feed the plant to get it established, then you back off, and you don't side dress again until fruit has actually set on the first cluster. My grandfather side dressed twice a season with the same coffee can, once when the plants took hold, and once when the first tomatoes were the size of a walnut. That was it. The rest of the summer they got water and got left alone. If your plant is a green monster with no fruit, stop the high nitrogen feed entirely. Don't try to fix it with more of something else. Just quit feeding it and let it get hungry enough to think about reproduction. Sixth, and this one is almost good news, go count the green fruit already hanging on that plant. If it's carrying a heavy load on a fairly young or fairly small frame, it will drop new blossoms on purpose. There are only so many carbohydrates coming off those leaves in a day, and developing fruit gets first claim on them. New flowers get cut off. That's not a sick plant. That's a plant doing arithmetic. Nevada's extension has written about exactly this, a heavy early set on a small plant causing later blossom drop. If that's your situation, you don't have a problem. You have a crop. Seventh, water swings, not too little swings. Soak, bone dry, soak, bone dry. A tomato reads that pattern as an emergency and starts shedding flowers. And while it's at it, you'll get blossom and rot on the fruit it kept, because calcium moves with water, and a plant that keeps drying out can't deliver calcium to the growing end of the fruit fast enough. That's why blossom and rot almost never means your soil is short on calcium. It means the delivery truck keeps getting stuck. Deep, steady, and mulched beats frequent and shallow every day of the week. Now, the 3 fixes that don't work, and one of them is genuinely destructive. Misting the leaves through the afternoon, in dry country as a real sprinkle that wets the plant and cools the canopy, fine. That's the Nevada trick, and it earns its keep. As a little spray bottle mist on the foliage in humid country, it does nothing for the air temperature, nothing for the night lows that are actually causing your problem, and it hands fungal disease a damp leaf to land on. Hard pruning to let the light in. Please don't. In August, that canopy is the only thing standing between your green fruit and sun scald, which is a white leathery patch on the shoulder that will not ripen and will not heal. Some of the heat-bred varieties come with instructions specifically telling you not to prune, because the canopy is part of the design. You can pull a few interior leaves for airflow in humid country. Stripping a plant in a heat wave is how you turn a slow problem into a ruined one. Blossom set spray. Those hormone sprays are real, and they do work in the cool nights of spring when the trouble is temperatures below 55. They do essentially nothing for heat-sterilized pollen, because the problem isn't a lack of signal. It's that the pollen itself is dead. Save your money. So what actually helps starting this afternoon? Here's your list. Get 30 to 40% shade cloth over the plants during the worst stretch, hung on the west and southwest side where the brutal afternoon sun comes from, and set a foot or so off the foliage so air still moves. Take it off once your highs settle back under 85, because after that, you want every bit of light for ripening. Mulch deep with straw or shredded leaves, 3 or 4 inches, and pull that mulch right out to the drip line. You're insulating the root zone, and you're covering up soil that would otherwise store heat and release it at midnight. Water deep and on a schedule, not on a mood. In most soils, that's a long soak once or twice a week, rather than a sprinkle every evening. Around mid-morning, walk the row and give each flower cluster a gentle flick with your finger, or a light tap on the stake. Most pollen shed happens between 10 and 4, and mid-morning is when your temperatures are still borderline enough that the pollen might be viable. It takes 4 minutes for a whole row. Some mornings it does nothing. Some mornings it's the difference. And this is the one that matters most, the one almost everybody gets wrong. Keep watering and keep the plant healthy through the dead spell, even though nothing is setting. That's straight out of the Desert Extension guidance, and it's the whole ball game. Most gardeners give up in the last week of July, quit tending, and lose the fall crop that was coming to them. When your night lows drop back under 75, and they will, that plant will set again, hard, and you'll pick tomatoes into the first frost. But only if it's still a healthy plant when the weather turns. You are not growing tomatoes right now. You are keeping a factory staffed through a slow month. One more thing for next season, because half of you are going to hit this again. There are varieties bred to set fruit in heat that shuts everything else down. Solar Fire came out of the University of Florida's program and was selected specifically for setting fruit at temperatures where standard varieties drop everything. Heatmaster, Phoenix, Florida 91, Somerset, Heatwave 2 are all in that family. And here's the honest part that the catalogs won't tell you. Maryland's Extension trialed several of these and did a taste test, and Florida 91 came out on top with Heatmaster right behind, while Phoenix and Jamestown were rated bland and a little mealy. So, you're trading some flavor for reliability, and the smart way to spend that trade is to put in 2 or 3 heat-set plants to carry you through the gap, and keep your Cherokee Purple and your Brandywine for the spring and fall windows when they can actually do what they're good at. That's how the southern market growers have done it forever, and They've done it that way because August doesn't negotiate. If you're in Zone 8 or south, this July gap is a normal annual event, and you should be planning your season in two crops around it, spring and fall, the way it's been done down there for 100 years. Zone 5 or 6, this might be one ugly week and then you're back in business. Check your own night lows before you decide which kind of summer you're having. So, here's where we land. My grandfather wasn't being folksy when he said tomatoes take July off. He was telling me about a 50-hour pollination window and a 60 to 70-degree night, using the only words he had for it, and he was right about all of it, except the vocabulary. The old growers didn't fight the gap. They planned around it. They kept the plants alive through it, and they got paid on the other side. Go count the green fruit on your vines tonight before you decide this season was a failure. I think you'll be surprised. If this helped, subscribe so the next one finds you, and tell me down in the comments what your night lows have been running and what zone you're in. I read them, and I'll answer as many as I can get to. Next time we're getting into what to sow right now for a fall harvest, because there's a whole crop most people leave on the table every single year. Until then, take care of yourselves and take care of those plants. See you in the garden.